Today's episode of the StallSide podcast was brought to you by Rood and Riddle Veterinary Pharmacy.
Bart, how are you doing today?
I'm good today. Good afternoon, Peter. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, we got a great guest on the show today.
Absolutely. We have Dr. Katie Garrett back again, and she's truly one of the gems of Rood and Riddle.
Yeah, look, we're all very proud about what Katie's done for us. She's just driven diagnostic imaging in the practice to a new height, and she somehow finds time to be president of the AAEP.
And the AAEP is a fabulous organization, and she's leading that this year, and so we thought it'd be a great idea to have her come in and explain to people what that is and what it does, not just for veterinarians, but for horses and owners as well.
Yeah, that's right. The American Association of Equine Practitioners has a website. Dr. Garrett will talk about that, and that actually provides a lot of information, as you say, not only for veterinarians, but also for horse owners, and it's a great one-stop place to go to get a bead on what's going on.
Yep, fabulous organization. So I'm excited to have her in and talk about that.
That's great. So on StallSide this week, we have Dr. Katie Garrett, who's on staff here at Rood and Riddle Equine Hospital, and she's going to talk to us about the AAEP. Dr. Garrett, welcome back to StallSide.
Thank you so much for having me again.
And thanks for being with us again today. It's good to have you back.
Yeah,
we'd like to talk to you about your role as the president of the AAEP. So just to inform the audience, what is the AAEP?
So the AAEP is the American Association of Equine Practitioners, and it's our professional organization for equine vets. So most people have maybe heard of the AVMA, which is kind of like the AMA, except it's for veterinarians. And then there's separate little groups for different disciplines. And so the AAEP is the discipline group for equine vets. We have about 7,500 members, mostly in North America, but worldwide. So it's a pretty great organization. It's the largest equine veterinary organization in the world.
Impressive. And so what is the AAEP's mission, right? As you say, it's sort of like a professional organization for equine veterinarians. So what does it want to achieve?
So the AAEP is here to support equine veterinarians and also the horse. So there are sort of three main pillars of what the AAEP is involved in. So it's involved in the profession of equine veterinary medicine. That's kind of the veterinarians, the people. Then there's education, which is kind of the people and the horses together. And then there's the horse, so promoting welfare and health of horses. And part of what the AAEP does to help horses and also its people is its charitable arm, which is known as the Foundation for the Horse. It used to be called the AAEP Foundation, but it got renamed a few years ago because honestly, it seems more appropriate to call it what it is. It's not a foundation for horse vets, it's a foundation for horses. So that's why that name got changed. And
yeah, good distinction.
Yeah, well, and I think people can sometimes get a little confused about the mission of the professional organization versus the mission of the charitable organization. I mean, they're linked, obviously, inextricably, but having a charitable arm allows a lot of funds to be given away, grants and things like that. You know, there are people who want to donate money to help horses or help veterinary students, all of those sorts of things. So,
and it does go to some great things.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a wonderful cause. They give away about $1 million in scholarships and grants a year. So it's not an insignificant amount of money.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's good to change that name because Foundation for the Horse puts the horse out front. So talk about some of the initiatives the Foundation has taken lately.
So there are sort of three main areas. So there's horses at risk. So that's things like the Equitarian Initiative, cases of abuse or neglect, maybe horses who have been abandoned. There are different activities and money that can go for that. There's education. So money goes to support student scholarships. So about $500,000 is awarded in student scholarships. I don't think I probably need to tell either of you the cost of higher education in general is increasing, and that's certainly the same for veterinary students. So being able to defray some of the cost of a veterinary education can put students really in a much better place when they go out into practice. So rather than having $200,000 in debt, maybe they only have $100,000 in debt, right, which is still a lot of money, but it's half of what they would have had otherwise. And especially when we talk about some of the salary disparities between equine and small animal starting salaries, we know that those differences really sort of even out over time. But starting out, if you're a vet student and you're graduating from vet school and you have this debt that you have to service, maybe not having as much debt can help you realize that actually you can make it as an equine practitioner right off the bat financially if you don't have quite as much debt as you would have otherwise. Because otherwise, those signing bonuses that some of these small animal places have can look pretty attractive. And we'd rather take that factor out of the equation so that people can practice the kind of medicine that they really were born to do.
Right. And that's better for the industry. It's better for the horse and everybody if we have a good pool of veterinarians coming in.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So picking up on one word you used, equitarian, right? Mm-hmm. There's probably people listening here that don't know what that word means. So just could you define equitarian for us and actually just expand on some of the things the Equitarian Initiative does?
Sure. So equitarian is a portmanteau of equine, which is horses, and then humanitarian, which is helping people. So equitarian is helping people and horses together. So there are a lot of horses that have jobs in developing countries, and the horses are part of people's livelihood. In the U.S., a lot of time we think about horses as being like a pleasure activity or something we do for fun, and in other countries they are part of a family sustaining itself. So veterinary care in some of those areas isn't as advanced or as accessible as it is here, but there are missions that go to these areas and provide free veterinary care, horse husbandry advice to help these horses stay healthy and contributing back to the families that they're part of for many more years. And it's most people who go on equitarian trips, I've never been on one, but I hear wonderful things about them. They come back saying that they are rejuvenated about their passion for equine practice because some of sort of the day-to-day annoyances that we always have in our jobs, I mean, no job is absolutely perfect, they can kind of fade into the background when you really remember, well, why did you get into this in the first place? I mean, right. This is why we do this. And it's a little bit easy to lose sight of that sometimes, but trips like that can really put things into perspective.
Yeah, I know former President, Dr. Rob Franklin is very strong in the Equitarian. He showed me some pictures of the things he'd done, and as said, the working equids, the burrows, and that basically supports the family. As you say, if the animal cannot work, the family does not eat. And there's one picture that sticks in my mind. The gentleman was riding the burro. He had no legs, and he was providing the money for the family. And that was the only way he could get around to do his job. And so you look at that, if you take the animal away, these people are going to starve. So it is very important. You also picked up another thing there about the cost of education and basically probably the sustainability of the profession, because the cost of entry is very high. And, kudos for the AAEP to try to lower that barrier. So talk to me a little bit about the sustainability of the profession. Do we have enough people coming in wanting to be equine vets? And if not, what can we do about it?
Well, we have just the bare minimum number of people leaving school and going into equine practice to sustain ourselves. But the problem is that within the first 5 years of veterinary school graduation, 50% of those people leave the equine veterinary medicine profession. Most of them stay in veterinary medicine. They might go to industry, they might go to small animal, but we cannot sustain ourselves with our relatively small pool. About 6% of graduates of U.S. veterinary colleges choose equine. And if half of those people are then leaving and not being maintained in the profession, we do not have enough equine veterinarians. I mean, that is just simple math. And there are a million different reasons why this is. I mean, some areas of the country that are especially rural, it's difficult for that area to financially support a veterinarian. So the AAEP can't do much about that specifically. States have various loan repayment programs that can help get veterinarians into more rural areas. But more of what the AAEP has focused on is improving conditions within equine practices and veterinary schools and internship type programs to be really more consistent with kind of how society operates today, to keep this profession attractive so that it maintains its cachet and its viability, really. Because, I mean, all of us love this profession. I want there to be this profession forever, but we are a little bit in a challenging time right now. I think things are getting better now that we've kind of worked on this a little bit, but if we don't keep trying to keep our product, that being an equine veterinary job, attractive, we are going to lose out in the marketplace, essentially. And it's not just financial compensation. It's the lifestyle. It's all sorts of different things. So it's not like we can't just throw money at the problem. That's not it. It's also about changing the way we work. So one of the major pain points is emergency coverage. I mean, all of us have done emergency coverage. We know what that means. And it is pretty draining. And part of that drainingness is not going out to see the horse. Most people, once you get in the truck and you go see the horse, or you come into the clinic and see the horse, you're happy to help the horse. But it can take a toll just waiting for that phone to ring, and it can take time away from family time, other leisure activities, that mental reset that you need, getting away from just working. So long story short, the AAEP has sort of identified 5 major areas of pain points. And so emergency coverage is one of them. Compensation is another one. The student experience, what are we telling our students in vet school? Are we telling them good things about equine practice, or are we only telling them the bad things? I mean, there's good and bad in everything. The internship experience, how can we make sure that it's an educational experience that's valuable for the student, but also is fulfilling the needs of the practice? And, for internships, some of it has been focusing on making sure that the potential intern and the practice are a good fit for each other. Because there's, if there are 100 internships in America, there are 100 different types of internship, and they're not going to be right for everybody. I mean, everyone has their own career goals and their own style and everything like that. So rather than trying to say, okay, every internship should look like X, it's more about how can we provide a mechanism so that practices can, sort of say, this is who we are. If you're interested in us, fantastic. And if you're not, great, there's probably some other people in here, maybe some other options that might fit you better. And also providing support to practices and say, hey, these are some guidelines just so you know what students are kind of being told and what their experience in vet school has been like, to really kind of try and, marry this up a little bit better. Because if people's expectations aren't in line with reality, everyone is going to be unhappy. And that goes for both the interns and the practices. So essentially, the more transparent that practices and interns can be with one another, probably the happier that everyone's going to be. And I mean, no one is suggesting that internships should be a walk in the park. I mean, they're meant to be a challenging year, that you have your first year out of vet school. That's where you set your habits. That's really where you learn to be a grown-up vet. So it is going to be a little challenging, but how can we kind of strike that balance to make it challenging but rewarding at the same time? Sorry, I sort of got sidetracked a little on internships.
That's a very good summary.
But that's what people need to know as well, is that the profession is in a state of flux, right? And that there is like a core of senior veterinarians that will be leaving the profession within the next decade or so, and we need to refill the pipeline. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, people are not going to have service, and they, I think, are going to have to see their veterinarian a little bit differently, and that the veterinarian will now work differently. Maybe practices will move to a system where they're more collaborative, and that way that we can ensure that the animal is taken care of, and the people's needs and wants for that animal are also taken care of. And so you've said a lot there. Is this just a United States problem, or is this a problem all over the world?
It is definitely a problem all over the world. And, Peter, as you know, we were both in Australia at the Bain Fallon conference, and we got to talk to a bunch of our colleagues and sit on a panel. And we talked about the US, and we talked about Europe, and we talked about England, and we talked about New Zealand, and we talked about Australia. And the same basic things are happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are some little details, but really, and actually, I don't think it's just equine practice or veterinary medicine. You hear the same sorts of things about other professions as well. I mean, I read something about accountants, for example. So, I mean, it seems mm-hmm. like, times change, and change is hard. Even if it's change you want, it's hard. If it's change you don't want, it's like triple hard. So it seems like not just us, but really the whole world is in a little bit of a state of change of sort of how we work. And honestly, probably COVID sped up a lot of those changes that probably were sort of coming out there anyway. But shove everyone into a very unusual situation, and things kind of probably evolve a little bit faster than that.
Yeah, no, it was definitely accentuated by COVID. Yeah. And I think we've seen a little bit of a rebound after COVID got over, but during those years it was really rough. But there's a lot of different factors, right? It's it's demographics, it's rural versus urban, it's gender, it's generational. There's a whole slew of factors to deal with. But as Peter alluded to, I think in the end, horse owners are going to have to adjust, because traditionally it seems like small animal veterinarians are at a location, whereas as an equine veterinarian, if you have an equine doctor, you have a doctor, not a practice that you work with. And that's got to bend just a little bit too, to give people some relief.
Well, and that's something that the AAEP is sort of a little bit uniquely positioned to do. And so we have a horse owner education committee, and some of this is just sort of like, hey, you know, like, can you give your horse cold water after they've exercised? So some of it is just sort of general horse owner education, but some of it is also helping our members tell their clients things not directly, because it can be easier for an organization like the AAEP to bring up some of these harder issues than it is for a veterinarian to have that conversation, or even start that conversation with the client. So a lot of the social media stuff has focused on owner education, those little facts, but also teaching owners, well, what is an actual emergency? You know, what needs to be seen right now? What needs to be seen the next morning? What can wait until Monday? Teaching people sort of the realities of, hey, this is what your veterinarian had to do to become a veterinarian. So, I mean, horse owners are wonderful people. I think sometimes we as veterinarians have not done ourselves any favors by not really being totally transparent with people about what have some of our lives had to look like. So I think some of that owner education that the AAEP can do is on sort of softer things about that, like, hey, you know what? It really helps your veterinarian if you pay your bill on time. They're a small, they're a small business.
Yeah.
And if you think about, your family's small business, you don't extend credit. So, I mean, even just little things like that have been a little bit ingrained in our industry, they need to change, because, I mean, the world has changed.
Yep.
And if the AAEP, you've alluded to the fact it has a lot of information for owners, where do they readily access this information? What's the vehicle?
So the owners can just go to aaep.org. And there's a lot of education there. Probably the best entry point for horse owners is social media. So like the Instagram or the TikTok, any of that sort of stuff, because that can kind of get them hooked. And notifications about things like webinars for horse owners they're out there. And then there's a tremendous resource library as well for horse owners. And also for members, there are a lot of resources available on the AAEP website in the member section that you can just pull off there and use for your clients. So things like vaccination guidelines, deworming guidelines, biosecurity guidelines. So there's a lot of things that are available to the veterinarian that the veterinarian can then take and use to help them educate their clients. So it's not only, sort of a direct to owner, it's also facilitating that relationship between the owner and their veterinarian. Because, I mean, you can't call the AAEP office at midnight if your horse is colicking. So a lot of this, I mean, you can, no one will answer. A lot of this is about strengthening that individual one-on-one relationship, and how can the AAEP make that a little bit easier for an individual practitioner who's busy and, might not have time to put together these little packets.
So I mentioned at the start of the podcast that you are the president of the AAEP for this year, and so that's a pretty prestigious position. And congratulations for that.
Thanks.
And just talk to us a little bit about your journey to become the president. Like you were involved in the AAEP for some time. What things did you do? What service did you give to the organization that identified you as a good candidate to be the president?
Well, I guess I can probably blame, if I need to pick one person to blame, I can blame Dr. Bramlage, because he was involved in leadership when I was finishing up my internship here. So 2 years out of vet school, I ended up on the Educational Programs Committee for the AAEP. And to be perfectly honest, I was scared out of my mind, because I was sitting around a table with the people who wrote the textbooks and whose name I mean, and I'm like, I am this idiotic like kid.
Yeah.
What am I even doing? I mean, I was really into, like, I was worried about what to wear. Like, that's the level of worry that I had. But I mean, everyone was so incredibly nice. Like Margot McPherson, who is, you know, a very well-known theriogenologist, happened to be sitting next to me, and she was so nice and so normal and just really made me feel at ease. And that has always been my experience with the AAEP, that it is a very welcoming organization, and people are happy that you're there and happy that you're volunteering your time. So I started out as a committee member, and then on the educational programs committee, and then I became the vice chair of that committee, then I became the chair of that committee. So it was a little bit of like a 9-year journey there. And throughout that time, I was involved in some other task forces and different types of things. I went to one of the leadership conferences, and eventually I was asked to run for the board of directors, which honestly was a bit of a shock to me, but I did, and I won. So then I was on the board of directors for 3 years. And when I was done with that, I was then the chair of another committee, and then I thought I was done. And then they asked if I was interested in becoming an officer, which really shocked me, because I was just really, this is not what I envisioned happening to me. But I have gotten far more out of the organization than I have put in. I mean, the people that I've met, people that I never would have crossed paths with because they work in a totally different area of veterinary medicine. I've met some amazing people, and it has just been really rewarding to be able to give back to the profession, because so many people have given so much to me. I mean, looking back, the veterinarians in my hometown, it's small, 3 to 4 doctor practice. One of those veterinarians, she was president of the AAEP, and I think about 10 years ago. So, I mean, I've had these leadership and volunteer qualities modeled for me throughout my entire career, from, even before I got to Rood and Riddle to when I've gotten here. So I guess I just feel like it's a tremendous honor to be able to give back to the profession, and mostly I'm just trying not to screw it up.
Well, you've done very well at that, because for you to say that you've gotten more than you've put in, you've put in an awful lot, and we're very grateful for it.
I mean, it is a team sport. That is for darn sure. I mean, believe me, there are a lot more people doing the hard work than I think get the credit they deserve.
Yeah, and everybody also needs to realize that you're the president, but you also have a full-time job as well.
Yes. That is one thing that's, I think, a little different. It used to be a little bit that people ended up in leadership more towards the end of their careers, and over time that shifted a little bit there. And so now it's a little bit more broad of a representation of who's in the leadership, which I think is helpful to have kind of a wider swath of experiences and types of all of those sorts of differences. But it does make it a little bit more challenging to not be sort of semi-retired, but it probably also makes me better at it, because I mean, I'm in the trenches. I mean, when someone says, wow, I had this really hard case, I'm like, yeah, I relate.
So what does a day look like for Katie Garrett?
In my regular job?
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, you guys know this, but I work in our diagnostic imaging department. So let's see, a typical day usually starts with a CT myelogram. Those start around 7, and then it's usually followed by, let's say an MRI, and then a skull CT, and maybe a PET scan from Saratoga or something like that. And then kind of like sprinkled around the edges are a bunch of ultrasounds. There's usually a Zoom call thrown in there, because why not? So that's a pretty typical day for me. I mean, I like the variety. I like being able to see something new every day. I like being surprised by things and seeing something I've never seen before. I mean, I like the puzzle of diagnostic imaging. That's what really, really appeals to me about it. I'm pretty excited because we have another veterinarian joining us who just finished her radiology residency, Dr. Erica Dobbs. So I'm very excited to share this, amazing career path with her. She's just a total superstar. Like I'm just really, really excited to get to work with her. So she'll be starting here in September. So look out for her.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And in the middle of all of that, she's still the president.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anything else you'd like to tell us about the AAEP? Where do you see this organization going?
Well, I hope the organization is around for many, many years to come. And, I think we've just talked about sort of growing pains in workforce and things like that. I mean, I think the AAEP as an organization is going through some of those additional growing pains, but I think kind of coming out the other side, and I guess I would say that kind of keeping focused on, what is our mission? What are we supposed to do? Well, we're supposed to help the equine vets and we're supposed to help horses. And I think as long as we keep those things in the forefront of our mind, I think we'll be fine. We have to innovate. We have to think about things like, education, continuing education is a huge part of the AAEP's mission. So we need to make sure that we keep delivering the continuing education in innovative ways. And what do people want? So, for example, one of the new initiatives this year are these XP wet labs. So these are 20 attendees to these labs, 5 instructors. So like a 1-to-4 instructor to student ratio, which is pretty great, and a huge wet lab component because everyone says we want small group, hands-on stuff. So, even with education, we have to keep innovating to make sure that we're delivering that education in the ways that reach as many different people as possible. So we need to make sure that we have something for all sorts of different types of learners. I mean, some people would really rather go watch the webinar after the fact when they have time in their lives rather than having to be present at a specific time, in a specific place, in a specific room, which may be exhausting when you've been at that conference for 5 days. So I think some of like the variety in how education can happen, I mean, we all kind of like make fun of the internet for taking over our lives, and it has a little bit, but it's also provided some pretty great ways to connect with people and deliver information a lot more efficiently and in a lot more customized way. So I think that is a positive thing. I mean, as we talk about things like, making time for your work and your personal life and kind of finding a way to make that all mesh together, flexibility is kind of the name of the game. So I think that will help keep the AAEP relevant, is just not being stagnant. Think about what's happening in the future. Don't forget about the past. Certainly, there's good stuff that happened in the past, that's for darn sure, but don't forget to keep out looking for all of those trends that are happening in the future.
Yeah, I think, like the profession's changed, our jobs have changed, and definitely the way you get your educational information has changed as well. And I mean, the AAEP is leading the charge.
Yep. But one thing that hasn't changed is it's still a great place for us to get together and collaborate. And, it's the continuing education that veterinarians get from it is unparalleled.
Well, and you just touched on something like it's not just about learning. It is also about coming together and getting to see all those people at the convention that maybe you hadn't seen since last year, and going to the alumni receptions and just all of that sense of community. I mean, this is pretty sappy of me, but that first morning when there's the opening session and everybody's in this one room and, it's all talking about all the things that have been done, I still find it really inspiring that we're all in that room. We're all sort of involved in a common goal. Like it reminds me of, hey, this is why I decided to do this. This is why I didn't go to medical school. I'm not sure that like physicians have that same sort of sense of community that equine veterinarians do.
It's definitely a tight knit group, and you meet people you make new connections every year, and like you said, catch up on old ones, and you see who's there, who's not there. It's great.
Yeah, and it's good to see how everybody's trying to solve the same problem. Sometimes they do it a little bit differently. So like you alluding to what you said before, you always sort of get more out than you put in. Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating insight into the AAEP. Thank you for coming to see us today.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a ton of other stuff that like I didn't have time to touch on. So, if people are interested, just go to the website. It's AAEP.org. And there's lots of interesting stuff on there.
Yeah, great website too.
That's great. Thanks, Katie. It was been a great talk. And that's StallSide for this week. We've been talking to Dr. Katie Garrett, who is president of the AAEP. See you next time.